More than 100 former high-ranking DOJ officials from both Democratic and Republican administrations have signed on to a brief filed yesterday opposing what they call a retaliatory and vindictive prosecution of former FBI Director James Comey. It reads in part, quote, "The indictment of Comey was not an exercise of the even-handed judgment of a disinterested prosecutor acting free from personal bias, partisan animus, or divided loyalties. Instead, it represented an act of personal retribution by the president, acting through a United States attorney whom he had recently selected." Comey was charged late last month with 2 felony counts, lying to Congress and obstructing a congressional proceeding. He has pleaded not guilty to both charges.
And joining us now, one of the signatories of that amicus brief, retired Judge J. Michael Luttig. He served on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. Also with us, staff writer at The Atlantic, David A. Graham. Both have written articles for The Atlantic's December issue, which is titled "The Coming Election Mayhem." And we'll dive into that in just a moment. But Judge Luttig, while we have you, let's get more thoughts first on what you're seeing in this Comey case narrowly, but also more writ large, the president's campaign of retribution. And he seemingly has found enough officials in the Department of Justice and U.S. attorneys to carry out his bidding.
Yes, I consider the presidency to date as a presidency of revenge and retaliation for personal offenses against the president. That is, personal offenses, in his view, committed by his political opponents, whom he now calls his enemies from within. But this prosecution of the former FBI director is part and parcel of the same plan for revenge and retaliation against all of his political enemies. And that plan is now underway, and we've not even begun to see the end of it yet. As you know, the president has accused former presidents of treason, and everyone else in the Democratic Party of wrongdoing against America.
So, David, let's now turn more thoroughly towards the upcoming cover story at The Atlantic, warning about the coming election mayhem. I knew this piece was in the works, and so glad it's here. It's a growing topic of conversation on this show and other places. So this idea that these elections coming they'll happen, but they may not be free and fair. Talk to us about some of the concerns you've discovered that officials have in your reporting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I talk to experts, including experts who are very worried, none of them thought there wouldn't be elections. And partly that's because even competitive authoritarians, the sort of modern day authoritarians, like elections. It gives them a sort of impression of legitimacy. But what you do is you tilt the playing field all along. So you start out by, for example, arresting people like James Comey to intimidate the opposition and make other people think they might not want to get involved in the political arena. Then you move forward towards sort of changing the rules of the election. We've seen that, for example, in gerrymandering in states across the country. Then you move forward to suppressing the vote when the election happens. Mm-hmm. And then finally, after the election, you try to throw out votes. So it's a multi-step process where you have all these ways that you can try to affect the election. And even if not all of them work, you might be able to affect the outcome.
David, I always thought that one strength of our system, it's kind of ironic because it makes it more complicated, but our system is we have like 51 different election systems in the states and the District of Columbia. All have their own rules and their own procedures, their own ballots. Does that not sort of mitigate whatever trouble, whatever mischief, or whatever the Trump administration might want to cause?
Yeah, I think that's the real strength of our election administration system going into the 2026 election. The president, first of all, the federal government doesn't have that much control over it. And certainly the president himself doesn't have a lot of control over it by constitution or law. Of course, that hasn't kept him from trying to do things to assert control. So, for example, we've seen him issuing executive orders where he purports to do things like, tell states that they have to have all ballots counted by election day, or to try to tell them what voting machines they can use. So even he doesn't have that legal power, he's trying to assert it. And the question is whether states will follow that or if they will stick to their own laws.
Judge, the question that has been certainly raised by figures like Steve Bannon, who, again, mileage varies on how seriously to take his media strategy, but that has sort of infiltrated actual conversations with real people such as yourself concerns the question of whether Donald Trump will in fact try to be president for a third term. Where are you on that question? How do you see that threat?
Well, that question, whether Donald Trump will attempt to succeed himself in the presidency, is on the minds of virtually every American today, only 10 months in to his second term. There's a reason for that. The president's been in office approximately 10 months now. He began talking about a third term 2 months into that 10 months. And he and his allies and supporters have continued to talk about it up until yesterday, when the president himself spoke to the issue and Steve Bannon also spoke to the issue. During that 10 months, Donald Trump has seized, he has sought, and he has actually seized near absolute unchecked power in the United States. That is, unchecked by either the Congress or the Supreme Court, the several states, or the media itself. There's no question at all that as of today, Donald Trump has all the power he would ever need to run for a third term and be seated as the next president, whether or not he actually won that election.
On that note, these new pieces are part of the Atlantic's December issue, which is out tomorrow.